What's going on? I'm Anokhi_The_One, and I'm back with another video. And this video is more about my stance on the Black Lives Matter topic and how this black lesbian has left the left. Okay, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I've never been on the left. I've never been on a side. I have always been a person who questions authority and questions everything. And I've never fit into any community, period. I just have never. I've never fit into the black community. I've never fit into the LGBT cult that it is largely become. And I hope y'all are triggered by this video because I have experienced real racism. And that is why I'm so upset about the Black Lives Matter. And I've studied a lot about the history of black people and the history of blackness and the identity and the genealogy of the average black person. I mean, it's so crazy because on 4th of July, y'all need to follow me on Instagram because that's where I post a lot of information. As I am learning about things, I post a lot in my Insta story. So a lot of you who have been following me on my Insta story, y'all know some stuff that nobody else will know from, just watching my YouTube channel. But on 4th of July, I found out, shout out to Kurimayo with his channel. He talks a lot about indigenous heritage and indigenous people and the fact that a lot of black people, African American people, are actually indigenous to the Americas in all kinds of different places all around the world. That's a whole nother video that I plan on making soon. So the fact that on 4th of July, all this craziness all for months has been going on. I have been studying tirelessly my genealogy, and I just so happen to have a family historian on that side of my family, so that helped a lot. And I did a video with Kuti Mayo about my ancestry, and I didn't even know at that time that George Washington was a direct descendant of mine. He is my first cousin 10 generations back. Let that sink in. Now, from that realization, for a person of color, most people would assume, and most people have assumed, and they end up looking like dumbasses, that I am a direct descendant of George Washington because of maybe he had sex with a slave or something of that nature, when in reality, if you know how a family tree works, there is so many possibilities as to how I could be related to George Washington. And there's so many possibilities as to how any quote unquote African American person could be related to every single statue that they were pulling down. That's the gag of genealogy. That's the red pill of genealogy. I think it's my fourth grandfather was half black, half white, or half indigenous, because the man looks like a black samurai. I look at his picture, I was just like, what is this? What is this? I don't remember this in history class. I mean, like a black samurai. He looked Asian. And I'm thinking that he was indigenous. And there was rumors that he was indigenous. And his father was the father of Fort Worth. His father was General, I think his name is General Ripley Arnold or something like that. Ripley Arnold, the father of Fort Worth. There's a big statue of my fifth great grandfather, who is the father of Fort Worth. Okay. My people are from New Orleans. My ancestors were free people of color in the 1800s, taking trips, vacations with their family to Haiti not long after the Haitian Revolution. Do you think a whole lot of white people was able to just roll up in Haiti after the Haitian Revolution? Hell no. But my ancestors was up in there. Okay? I have ancestry I have chills right now. I have ancestry from Cuba, from Haiti, from France, from but mostly from Louisiana, have been there for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. So what they don't want us to know is that we are more European Americans and African Americans who have been in America for hundreds of generations are more likely related to each other than and they want you to dismiss it by saying, they were raping all the slaves. Okay, well, if that's the case, what they don't tell you is that a lot of slaves were white, a lot of the slaves were Irish, a lot of the slaves were Jews and pale-skinned people, and also that there were a lot of slave owners who were black. Slave magnates who were black. A slave magnate has 100 plus slaves. Black men. Some black women. And there's a lot of different ways that was possible, because in the beginning it was indentured servitude, and once your indentured servitude is finished, you can get a lot of land, or you could buy land, you can start a farm, and through the course of time, you can build on that farm, because the only real economy was agriculture. That's just the way the world was all the way up until like the 1930s. So it's either you have a lot of land and then you just use it to be self-sufficient as a tribe or as a community, or you go to the next level, which is like being an entrepreneur pretty much in those times, and you start to get slaves. If the slaves are cheap or free labor, if you could buy them one time and you own them forever, black people would do it, white people would do it, indigenous people would do it, and they did it. They all was doing it, okay? In America, the entire time. The Lord has led me to bust so many myths. Some of y'all gonna have cognitive dissonance because of what y'all were told. Y'all gonna be like, some of y'all were like, well, a lot of the black people were just buying slaves to buy their ancestors out of slavery. Well, was they buying 100 plus of their ancestors out of slavery? No. Okay, no. They were slave owners. They were brutal. One of the first lifelong slaves was owned and fought for by a black man. A black man fought to have another black man be a lifelong slave. And that was the first lifelong slave. Then it became generational. That's the history that they completely delete. A history of the white slaves who were the first slaves in America. They like to call it the soft indentured servants, which they were slaves. They were on the same slave ships as the black people. There were a lot more of them in the America. 1/3 of the first settlement, or no, 2/3 of the first settlements in America of English people were indentured slaves who had been captured off the streets, out of the orphanages, out of the prisons, and brought to America against their will, or manipulated into believing that they're going to have a better opportunity, they're going to have a better life, only to find out that they're going to be slaves. They were tricked. They were dragged. They were stolen, like what they tell you that our ancestors did. There's a concept called being Barbadosed, and that is what the Irish people were. They were Barbadosed and brought to the sugarcane plantations. Largely Irish people. There's still people that sound Irish from Barbados. There's still Irish people. There's black people that look black but that have Irish ancestry because their Irish ancestors were Barbados. But you, based on the history that they told us, you would assume that they were the slave owners of the black people, which is not always the case. Sometimes it's the other way around. Right? So by finding out all this information and then finding out how Reconstruction was largely to create a eugenics type of America, of a eugenics type of South, when the South was largely not segregated, largely very much mixed, especially in New Orleans, where they were free people of color the entire time. That was a whole legal status where a free person of color could be dark to light to looking white and marry a French man or marry a white man according to their laws, the Code Noir, right, which is what a lot of my ancestors were, free people of color fighting in the military and all kinds of things, doctors, lawyers, going to college. I looked at one of my ancestors on the Perrault. They went to Howard University like 5 or 6 years after it was founded. Okay. And a lot of y'all black people out here that pride yourselves on saying that I was the first in my family to go to college. Well, if you don't know your genealogy, I highly doubt any of you were the first in your family, maybe in your immediate family, to go to college, but I highly doubt it. You got to know your genealogy. There's a lot going on in your genealogy that they want us to know. And so the purpose of the black versus the white, okay, these statuses, these legal statuses, because they don't physically mean anything, obviously, because I have yet to meet a black or a white person. If I ever were to meet a white person, they would be dead. I mean, because white people are dead. You turn white when you're dead, okay? Pink people, tan people, beige people, yes. Brown people, dark brown people, dark brown people, yes. Black, white, no. That's Masonic. That's demonic. That is satanic. That is divisive. And that is the point. Hope y'all hear this what is it? SMR? I'm old. I don't know. Hear me drinking my water. But so with that type of knowledge, okay, that type of and then to have this genealogy and to know your genealogy and to share your genealogy. Share my first cousin 10 generations back is George Washington. And then you have a fool claiming that they are Aboriginal, right? Because this is a movement largely happening right now, but it's still largely divisive because you still bring in the same mindset. This fool comes on my page and posts in comments under my post about George Washington, talking about my people are crazy. Why are you celebrating the fact that your ancestors or your people were raped by white people? And I'm just like, first of all, I don't know you, buddy. I don't know you at all. Second of all, my ancestors don't have to be raped to be related to George Washington. That was the colonized history that you were told, but that's a lie. My people are from New Orleans. My people, I don't know where your people are from, but my people is from New Orleans. And in New Orleans, they had Code Noir, and the French were in control of New Orleans all the way up until the mid 1800s, which was not that long ago. There's a lot of still speaking a little French in New Orleans right now. There's a lot of there's still a lot of French laws that are in place in New Orleans right now. Okay. And the French were largely open to mixing with black people. They acknowledged free people of color. They endorsed free people of color. Okay. So they married free people of color. They married black women who were enslaved so they could be free. So they had whole households. They had a white household and a black household. And although there still was a lot of New Orleans is a mecca of colorism at the same time, but at the same time, it's the mecca of black business and all this other stuff, which is largely the history of New Orleans is a lot like the history of Haiti, because there's a lot of independence in the 1800s with people of color. So you talking to me about my ancestors being raised. This is supposed to be a black person, Aboriginal person, claiming to be Aboriginal, coming on my stuff, speaking ignorance. Had to read you for filth. Had to break it down for you real quick. And I'm like, if you really are claiming to be Aboriginal, if you really know what the hell you're talking about, you would know that just by being in proximity with the white settler, if you really are an Aboriginal person, you're going to be ancestrally related to the white settlers, the white people, the leaders of this nation. Because you're Aboriginal, you've been here for thousands, your ancestors have been here for thousands of years. It is much more likely for your ancestors to be related to all the different types of people that have been in this soil than it is for you to be related to the people in Africa. That is just common sense if you really sit down and think about it. But it's the common sense. They don't teach us common sense. They don't teach us deductive reasoning. They don't teach us to question anything. If you question anything, you might get in trouble. Okay? And I was that type of person to question things. And I used to get in trouble. Could you imagine me in detention? I used to be in detention. Do you hear me? In junior high. Because I was asking questions. And my mom gave me Malcolm X to read. A book about Malcolm X to read. In junior high. And this is when they're starting to teach you history. Now, mind you, and this is important to know my background. Because it I don't know why. I do know why. I know exactly why. But people, for whatever reason, when you don't have black thoughts, when you don't fit into the mold of the black, okay? If you don't think exactly, you don't do and move exactly the way Joe Biden says to move and say, and the Democrats who are claiming that if you don't vote for them, then you ain't black, they get to tell you how black you are and how black you're not, then people assume that you are just loving the white man. You just love the white man. And I don't know why you love Trump so much. I don't know why you love this so much. What? I don't know why. Somebody even said, oh, I know you love your black daddy. I mean, your white daddy. Because they saw that I was related to direct descendant of George Washington. Even though my daddy is blacker than me. How do you just fucking assume that my father is white? Specifically my father too, though. It's just like, what the hell? Both my parents are black as hell. Like, but because people have been programmed in these white supremacist school systems, the school system, the way you were taught history was to teach your mind to think like a white supremacist. It literally, I call the history books of America the white supremacy manual. How to be a white supremacist. This is how to be a white supremacist. You want me to tell you how to be a white supremacist? This is how to be a white supremacist. 1, believe that all slave owners were white. And if they weren't white, they were tricked. White supremacy. 2, believe that all slaves were black. And if they were white, they were indentured servants, and they weren't real slaves. They were just indentured servants, and they were tricked. White supremacy. Believe that black people have been suffering forever, and they are constantly oppressed, and they are poor and ignorant. They can't go to college or school. Even if they go to college, even if they go to college, they're the first ones in their family to go to college or be educated. They are from the inner cities, and if they're not from the inner cities, they're not black. Or if they're not in the inner cities, they are not black, or their parents got a job because of affirmative action, and they basically have white privilege. White supremacy. if a black person has white ancestry, it's not because they were in proximity with white people and maybe one of their ancestors, maybe they fell in love with each other. Maybe they got married. Maybe they had a child. No. No. If a black person has white people in their ancestry, their black ancestors were raped. That's the only way. That is the only way, especially if it's in the 1800s, 1900s. That's the only way. White supremacy, which is bullshit. It's just bullshit. If your black ancestor, if you find out that your black ancestor was a slave owner, it's only because the only people that they were slave owners of was black people, and it's because they were trying to buy their slave ancestors out of slavery. All white people were slave owners. This is all white supremacy. Okay, all white supremacy. Most white people are descendants of slaves. There is only an elite group of people who ever owned slaves. Only rich people own slaves. You got to be rich to own slaves. That is not just something any and everybody can do. It could ever do. You have to be a part of the elite. And if you're not a part of the elite, you got to work really hard. Okay? Or it's passed down to you from generations. Which there are black people who pass down their slaves through generations, who pass down their land. A lot of you black people have land in the South, maybe even in the North, that your black slave owner ancestors have been owning, or your indigenous ancestors, which indigenous people were largely slave owners, owned and had slaves on. A lot of white people don't have any land. Don't come from having land. A lot of white people have only been here for 1 to 2 generations. And they came from a place where they were being enslaved. At the same time that this whole slave narrative was going on in America, there was a whole nother slave situation going on the other side of the world, where a lot of black African people were snatching up Irish people to the point where they took an entire, a coast. They wiped out an entire coast off the coast of Ireland. The whole town, they took them all and used them as slaves. So, what I really want people to understand is that unless you relearn history and unless you unlearn the history that we have been taught, you are a white supremacist. You're a white supremacist. You are. It doesn't matter if you're black, because white supremacy is about thinking that whites are supreme. The whole concept of white privilege is basically, then Lecrae was in the interview with this white pastor saying, instead of calling it white privilege, we should call it a white blessing. Because the whites had slaves and they were able to have upward mobility because of the slaves. Foolishness. Okay? Foolishness. But at the same time, there were black people. There's so many black people who know that their ancestors came from somewhere. That don't know that their ancestors had towns. My people owned a town. Had their own town. They said, oh, segregation? Great. I'm going to have my own town. Let's get it. We own everything in it. If you want to come through the town, we might even put coloreds only up in it. You can't come in my restaurant unless you're colored, which I don't even know if they were doing that. I doubt it, but there was segregation. But at the same time, if you're on the outskirts, like my ancestors were on both sides of my family, well, then there's less segregation, really, because that was largely in the inner cities. If you're agricultural, you just want people to work. We just need to get this land working. So unless you unlearn the history that we've been taught and relearn the real history and learn more about world history, the fact that there's still people white people who are being enslaved right now on the other side of the world, right now, today. And if they come to America, if they figure out a way to fight through slavery and make it here in America, okay, look this up. Don't believe me. Don't believe anything I say. Make it to America. They will immediately have white privilege. According to they will immediately be looked upon as if they have an advantage. Even though they just came from, they literally in their lifetime came from slavery. Then their children will be looked upon as if they have white privilege. They will be considered an American. They don't have to say they're white American. They don't have to say they're Russian American or European American or any other kind of American other than American. But you have people like me who have ancestry in this country since before it was this country, literally before New Orleans was even an American state. Before the Louisiana Purchase, I have ancestral records that my people were in New Orleans before New Orleans was New Orleans, before it was American, before it was Spanish. It was French, first indigenous, then French, then Spanish, then American. Okay, and I have ancestors who fought the British to make sure that New Orleans stayed American. But y'all motherfuckers, black and white, you all want me to say that I am African American, yet a South African white man could come to America and be called American. Y'all want me to be comfortable with that. The reason why you want me to be comfortable with that, not only do you want me to be comfortable with it, but you want me to embrace it. You want me to embrace that, right? You want me to embrace the fact that a white man born in South Africa, whose ancestors have been in South Africa for hundreds of years, can come to America, and maybe it's not him, but I guarantee you're not going to call him a South African American. You're not. His children will be called American. Not South African American, not African American, but American. So you want me to be okay with that. Why? White supremacy. White supremacy. Most people don't even know what it really looks like or is. And that's why you have somebody. I was having a conversation, and I like going in on comments and posts just to have conversations, just to debate, because it helps me with my content, because to have other people's minds, I mean, I could talk all day long about my experience and things like that, but unless I'm putting my experience up against other conversations and stuff like that and seeing how people react, then, I'm just in a bubble. One lady was basically upset because they had a girl screaming and yelling at a protest talking about black people don't own shit. That's why we burning everything up. And we can't own shit because white people had think about monopoly. Monopoly. Some of y'all seen this. White people had a 400-year head start, and black people, we starting just now, and we don't own shit. Well, I'm just like, well, that's not true. That's absolutely, literally not true. And people, because it's so emotional, because she's so emotional, right? It's crazy. She's so emotional. And not saying anything that is factual at all. And because white people did not have a 400-year start, because only elite white people owned slaves, and also elite black people owned slaves too. Okay? So all the poor people, we got, and my people, I didn't start from the bottom. I'm not going to lie. Okay. I'm not going to lie and tell y'all that I started from the bottom. I didn't start from the bottom. I started from the middle. My people were middle class, black people, entrepreneurs, and my people own land. We're indigenous people. We've been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I'm breaking this stuff down, and I'm breaking down the fact that, yeah, there were black slave owners. There were white slaves. It was not black and white like that. And there's only a tiny percent of the population who could even afford a whole lot of slaves. And a lot of those people were descendants of the British, or they just came from wealth, or they worked their behinds off and became slave owners because that was really the only economy that was going on right at that time. So, and I talked about my ancestors who owned their own towns and how that really wasn't that out of sorts. It wasn't that odd for a black family to own land, indigenous family to own land and own their own stuff, businesses. Till this day, it's not that uncommon. But it's only uncommon if you're a white supremacist. And if you believe Hollywood, if you believe the news, okay? And you don't base yourself in reality, okay? So this black woman had the nerve to say, well, I don't think you should be talking about this topic because you're privileged. What? So now the white supremacy has exceeded. It's exceeded. It is overwhelmed. Not only can you have privilege for being white and having a 400-year head start, but you can also have privilege by having ancestors who are entrepreneurs, who own land, who you yourself are an entrepreneur and work your behind off your whole life to own something. I basically, at the end of it, I was like, if you don't own anything at this point, you're a grown adult, maybe you should change what the hell you're buying. The only way you can own something is if you buy it. Do you want people to... What do you want? Buy something. Buy a piece of property. Buy something that is not a depreciating asset. Stop buying your children J's and the finest of clothes and being a consumer. The black dollar is billions and billions. We spend more money than almost any other demographic. So how can you possibly complain about not owning shit if we have the spending power of probably 2 to 3 demographics? Okay, what are you spending your money on? That's another that's another conversation. But people got mad at me for saying, if you don't own anything, buy something worth owning. That's common sense. I'm just not sensitive enough? Am I not oppressed enough for you? I'm not oppressed. I've never been oppressed. I've experienced real racism, and even then, I've never been oppressed. My dad would not allow me and my sister to say ma'am or sir. We were not allowed to call people ma'am or sir. Why? Not because we were disrespectful, but he didn't like the way it sounded. He felt like that sounded like a slave, and he don't want his children to sound like slaves. One of my uncles is a Black Panther, and it's just like they weren't rich. Nobody was rich. I don't have a whole lot of rich family that I know of directly, but we were, for the most part, middle class entrepreneurs, working hard, no excuses. Growing up I feel like growing up in a diverse area, growing up where I'm like around all black people that are going to all black schools, and then growing up in all white schools. After school, I'm in A-Leaf in the SWAT. My mom owned a hair salon in the SWAT. So I'm playing around with all the kids that only go to black schools, and all my cousins, for the most part, all went to all black schools. So I'm seeing how their mindset is working, and then I'm seeing how these white people mindset is working, and I'm seeing how a lot of black people who are raised around nothing but black people have an inferiority complex when it comes to being around white people, when it comes to the conversation of white people. And that is based in white supremacy. So you have these white teachers in these black schools teaching these black children white supremacy. That's why I have never finished college. You want to know the honest? There's a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons, I have never completed a history class in college. I went to community college. I went to U of H, tried to do history. I was like, y'all full of shit. Then I went to TSU, a historically black college and university. And the problem was that I had been educated in the true history, and I've been learning a lot. And I just could not understand how you could teach this white supremacist history in a group where almost everybody is black or not white. Non-white people, nothing but non-white people. And I questioned my professor in at HCC. He was the only white person in the class. And I'm like, and I would question him about stuff of the history because I was reading history, and I talked about, do you know about the book called They Came Before Columbus, which talks about how there was a lot of people of color here thousands of years before Columbus. And he's like, well, yeah, I've heard of it, but it's not been confirmed. It's not been confirmed. There is literally sculptures of black people, Negroid featured people, big lips, big noses, with braids in their hair from the Gulf of Mexico. And this fool wants me to believe that he believes that it's not been confirmed. You're a lie. I'm out of this bitch. Literally, I was like, I can't do this. Multiple times. Then at HBCU, my teacher was black. And I am educating her on history, on black history. It's just like, maybe you should, because she was of the mindset of Pan-Africanism. That's a whole nother conversation. But basically, Pan-Africanism doesn't make any kind of sense because the theory is that everybody comes from Africa. If everybody comes from Africa, then everybody is Pan-African. Everybody. That doesn't mean anything. That absolutely means nothing. So from that Pan-African mindset, then you have Afro-Latinos, which basically it makes blackness African, which is not the case. There are white people in Africa. Do you just dismiss all the white people that are born in Africa that have been there for hundreds of, white people came from North Africa, largely. So do you just erase all of them? Are they all gone? Are they not African? Are they not African enough? Are they all colonizers? Were some of them colonized and that's how they got there? Were some of them taken from Ireland by the black African Muslims and brought to some of these places? So I'm teaching her history, and I'm just like, I'm not doing this. She wants me to teach some of the classes, some of the stuff in the classes. You should come to the African American studies. You should come and talk to the students. I'm not talking to the students about African American studies because it's a fallacy. And African American studies was largely funded by eugenicists in the early 1900s who were creating this out of Africa, like all black people in America came from Africa, when in reality we had been indigenous people. We owned a whole lot of land, and they were trying to get our asses out of America, get us out of our land, and have us sent to Africa and have us wanting to go to Africa. Black Panther, the movie. It's so deep. I've been led down the rabbit hole where the Harlem Renaissance was largely about creating this African narrative through art, okay? And one of the main people funding the Harlem Renaissance, I had to really dig deep to find it. I had to look up his name. I may say it later so y'all can look it up. He funded the Harlem Renaissance, okay? They were paying black artists to paint Afrocentric paintings and create Afrocentric films and all this different type of stuff like that, and create, this is in New York. New York is the hub of eugenics movements. That's why the LGBT right now in New York and California have lost its fucking mind. Because that is the hub of eugenics movements, of divisive movements, of, manipulative. That's where the coronavirus, the Event 201 happened where they basically, what is it, did a simulation of the coronavirus pandemic in New York. That's the testing ground. They test on New York people. That's why I will never live in New York. No, I love it. I went there. I love it in the summer. Hate it in the winter. I love it. I enjoy it. The people are beautiful and diverse, but I'm not living in New York. Y'all crazy. They got too much crazy stuff going out there. I'm cool in Texas. I'm kind of hot in Texas, but I'm cool in Texas. You know what I'm saying? I'm cool. I'm good. Stuff is cheap out here. I could live life of luxury for what y'all paying for a room. No, okay? I ain't got time for that. I'm Southern. So, the man who funded the Harlem Renaissance was a real estate investor. Think about this. Now, I just told you the whole Pan-African movement was largely to get the black folk out of America, or to mentally and spiritually get them out of America so they can be duped out of their indigenous land that they had, largely, the Great Migration and the Trail of Tears, right? And then it was the Afrocentric, Pan-African, pro-black, pro-Afro movement, right? Funded largely by people who just wanted the land. They're just, oh yeah, pro-black, Afrocentric, get the African earrings and African shirts and African everything. Knowing good and well your grandparents done told you your Cherokee, your Choctaw, your Chata, your Blackfoot, your Chafunkta, Pamunkey. All these tribes in the United States. You're like, oh, my grandma is uneducated. She don't know what she talking about. Oh, you just want to be Indian because you don't want to be black. That was what the eugenics created. That is the mindset the eugenics created so they can get you out of your land and into Africa. In your mind, your body, and your soul. So, with all this, and I've been talking for a while, my thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement is that it is largely based in manipulation. It's largely based in bullshit. It's largely run by white men. It is funded by white liberals who Malcolm X warned against. And a lot of black people are white supremacists. Until you do your genealogy, until you study the true history of what they now call black people, until you deprogram your mind and reprogram your mind with information that is factual through your own family's genealogy, you are a white supremacist. You cannot. It's going to be really hard to understand how it could be possible for me to leave the left, for me to call out the bullshit of the Black Lives Matter, because I know that black is a term that was created for profit, okay, and not for identity sakes. Literally, it was to erase, to black out identity. White is to white out the identity of those people. And so now they can control a whole mass of people because they have a name for all this mass of people instead of all these different tribes who had their own purposes and movements and things and protecting their own tribes and things like that. Now, oh, you've betrayed the black man. You betrayed the black community by saying anything about any kind of black person. So then we can't hold individuals accountable because we are all black, which is whack because some of these people are manipulating. And it's so easy to be a black person that keep calling him Stephen King. Sean King, all he had to do was say, my mama said that yeah, she white and the person on my birth certificate white. But the truth is that she said she told me that my real daddy is light-skinned black man. And so that makes me a light-skinned black man. Even though my brother, he is white as hell. I'm white as hell. The person who is claiming to be, I've actually put that I was white on my paperwork. But my mama said that my daddy, my real daddy, don't know his name, but I do know the name of the black man or the white man who was on my birth certificate as my father. But my mama said my real daddy is a light-skinned black man. And I'm gonna go with that because I'm a race hustling piece of trying to take everybody's money. But I'm not gonna tell you that. He has no ties, no real ties. The only tie he has to black people is that he has a black wife. Now he's black. That's all you gotta do? Shit. How come I can't do that? I can't be white. I can't marry a white man and be white. I can't be like, well, shit. I know I look black. And you know what I'm saying? But, and I know the person on my birth certificate, my dad on my birth certificate, it says that he black, but my mom said that my dad is really a dark-skinned white man. And that's why I look like this, you know what I'm saying? That's why, on my birth certificate, I'm black. And it says this is a black man on my birth certificate, but my mama said that my dad was a dark-skinned white man. And so I'm white. I have a white husband. I got white children. They're not really white, but you know what I mean? That's what my mama said, so I believe it. Shit. See how easy that is to be black? It's very, very easy to be black. Anybody, any damn body, minus Asian people. I think Asian people are the only people that cannot, but now they're probably Afro-Asian now. Afro-Asian, Afro-Latino, Afro-white, Afro-indigenous now. This is new. Afro-indigenous. But it's real easy to be black. So I think that people need to be more critical thinkers. People need to do their genealogy and realize that black is not even real. White is not even real. And we are all connected. That's always going to be my thing. Anytime where there's division, you just know that it's elite planning and manipulation. And just don't be so, really reprogram your mind. It's time to stop being so sensitive, so female. Some of you are acting real feminine and not the good feminine. I'm talking about wounded feminine energy. It's just coming out, oozing out all over the place. And it's getting old. So I'll see y'all in the next video, and I'm out.